The red and blue lights cut through the rain like a blade. Marcus Reed slowed his black sedan to the shoulder, hands already visible on the steering wheel. He felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not fear exactly, more like anticipation, the kind that came from knowing the script before the first line was spoken. The officer approached slowly, too slowly, flashlight beam drifting over the hood, the rims, the interior, lingering where it didn't need to linger. "License and registration," the officer said. Flat voice. No greeting. Marcus complied. His fingers were steady. He had learned that steadiness was its own kind of armor. "You know why I stopped you?" the officer asked. Marcus met his reflection in the side mirror. Dark eyes, calm face, tailored coat that still smelled faintly of airport leather lounges and private terminals. "No, sir." The flashlight snapped to his face. "This car doesn't match you." The words landed heavy, not shouted, not slurred, just precise enough to hurt. Rain ticked against the windshield. Somewhere down the road, a truck horn blared. Marcus felt heat rise behind his ribs, old memories pressing forward. College security stops, investors who mistook him for staff, boardrooms that went silent when he spoke. The officer stepped closer. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus opened the door slowly. As he did, his phone vibrated in his pocket. A news alert. His company's logo glowed briefly on the screen before he locked it. Behind him, the officer's radio crackled. "Be advised," the dispatcher said, voice suddenly uncertain. "Run that name again." The rain stopped. The officer froze. Marcus turned, just as the flashlight slipped from the man's hand and hit the pavement. Marcus Reed noticed the patrol car the moment it slipped in behind him. Not because it was loud. Not because it rushed. 'Cause it stayed. 2 blocks. 3. The distance between them never changed. He kept his speed steady. 40. Hands at 10 and 2. The dashboard clock glowed. 11:47 p.m. Rain streaked the windshield in thin silver lines. The lights came on without warning. Marcus exhaled once and eased to the curb. "Here we go," he murmured, more habit than bitterness. He rolled the window down before the officer reached the door. The cold air carried wet asphalt and cut grass. "License and registration," the officer said. Marcus passed them over. The man didn't take them immediately. His eyes scanned Marcus's face, his coat, the stitched leather seats. "Where you headed?" the officer asked. "Home." "Where's that?" Marcus gave the address. The officer raised an eyebrow. "That so?" "Yes, sir." The flashlight dipped, lingering on the console, the watch on Marcus's wrist. "You own this vehicle?" the officer asked. "Yes." "Mind telling me how?" Marcus paused. "Be too long." "I bought it," he said evenly. The officer smiled thinly. "Step out of the car." "Am I being detained?" Marcus asked. The smile vanished. "Out. Now." Marcus opened the door slowly and stepped onto the wet pavement. He kept his hands visible, heart thudding, not fast, not slow. Controlled. The officer moved closer, voice dropping. "This area's had issues," he said. "High-end theft. Trafficking." "I haven't done anything," Marcus replied. "That's not for you to decide." A second cruiser pulled up. Then a third. Neighbors emerged onto porches. Phones lifted. The officer guided Marcus toward the hood, firm hands pressing him forward. "You fit a profile," the officer said. Marcus swallowed. "Which one?" he asked quietly. The officer didn't answer. Handcuffs clicked shut. From the corner of his eye, Marcus saw a woman across the street shake her head. Another man kept filming. The radio crackled. "Dispatch to Unit 12. Confirm identity on Marcus Reed." The officer stiffened. "Repeat," he said. "Marcus Reed." Dispatch said again, slower now. "DOB confirmed. Stand by." The officer's grip loosened. Marcus closed his eyes as the rain began again. The holding room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Marcus sat on a metal bench bolted to the wall, wrists uncuffed now but still marked red. The door clanged shut with a hollow finality that settled into his chest. Camera blinked in the corner. He knew that look, recording without acknowledgement. The officer who had stopped him stood across the room, arms crossed, posture casual again. Control restored. "You want water?" the officer asked. "No," Marcus said. The officer nodded as if that confirmed something. He turned to the desk and began typing. "Let's get this straight," the officer said. "You're driving a six-figure car through a residential zone late at night." "It was 11:47, Marcus replied. "Late enough." Silence stretched. Keys clicked. "What do you do for work?" the officer asked. "I invest," Marcus said. The officer stopped typing. Looked up. "Invest how?" "In companies." The officer smiled faintly. "Everyone invests in something." Marcus didn't respond. A younger officer stood near the door, hands clasped behind his back. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "So," the first officer continued, "no prior address in this district. No local plates. Cash-heavy vehicle." "There was no cash," Marcus said. The officer's fingers resumed their rhythm. "We'll see." Marcus leaned back against the wall. He focused on his breathing, on not letting the old anger rise too fast. Anger shortened sentences. Anger gave them excuses. "You ran my name," Marcus said. "Standard procedure." "And?" The officer shrugged. "Names don't always mean much." Marcus looked at the younger officer. Their eyes met briefly, then slid away. "What am I being charged with?" Marcus asked. "Nothing yet." "Then why am I here?" The officer didn't answer directly. He turned the monitor slightly, just enough for Marcus to see lines of text. "Suspicious behavior," he said. "Vehicle mismatch. Failure to provide satisfactory explanation. That's not a crime. Neither is asking questions." Marcus nodded once. "Then ask better ones." The officer's jaw tightened. "You think you're smarter than this room?" he asked. "I think this room already decided," Marcus replied. The officer stood. His chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Careful," he said. "Attitude can turn a delay into a night." Marcus met his gaze. "So can misconduct." The younger officer shifted. "Sir," he said quietly. Dispatch flagged the name again. The senior officer didn't look at him. "I'm handling it," he said. Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket again. Missed calls stacking up. He knew who they were from. He also knew what it would look like when he finally answered. The officer returned to his seat. "You got any proof of income?" he asked. "On my phone," Marcus said. "Unlock it." "No." The officer smiled. "Then we wait." Time dragged. The hum of fluorescent lights grew louder. Somewhere down the hall someone laughed. Marcus thought of his mother's voice years ago. "Be polite. Be precise. Never give them more than they ask for." "You know," the officer said, conversational now. "People like you usually slip up." "People like me," Marcus repeated. "Flashy," the officer continued. "In a hurry. Forget the details." Marcus leaned forward. "I was born 10 miles from here," he said. "I went to public school. I worked 2 jobs through college. I've been pulled over more times than I can count for matching descriptions that never existed." The officer tilted his head. "That's not my problem." "It is when you write it down," Marcus said. The officer looked at the screen again. He scrolled slower now. "Funny thing," he said. "System's lagging." The younger officer cleared his throat. "Sir, maybe we should." "Not now." The door opened. A sergeant stepped in, gray at the temples, eyes sharp. "What's going on?" the sergeant asked. The officer stood straighter. "Routine stop escalated. We're verifying." The sergeant looked at Marcus. Took him in fully for the first time. "Name?" the sergeant asked. "Marcus Reed." The sergeant paused. A flicker. Recognition or calculation, Marcus couldn't tell. That Marcus Reed? The sergeant asked. Marcus didn't answer. The sergeant turned to the computer. Read. Read again. The room changed. Why is he still here? The sergeant asked. We had reasonable suspicion, the officer said quickly. Based on what? The officer hesitated. Just long enough. The sergeant exhaled through his nose. Uncuff him. He's all ready. I said uncuff him. The officer complied, movement stiff. The sergeant faced Marcus. Mr. Reed, there's been a misunderstanding. Marcus stood. His legs felt steady. His voice did not shake. This wasn't a misunderstanding, he said. It was an assumption. The sergeant nodded once. You're free to go. Marcus picked up his coat. That's it, he asked. No record. The sergeant hesitated. There will be a report. Marcus smiled without warmth. Of course there will. As he walked toward the door, the officer spoke. You didn't have to make this difficult, he said. Marcus stopped. Turn. You didn't have to make it happen, he replied. He stepped into the hallway, past staring faces, past radios that suddenly went quiet. Outside, the rain had stopped again. His phone rang. He answered it. Yes, Marcus said. It happened. By the time Marcus reached his car, the street no longer looked the same. The patrol vehicles were gone. Neighbors had retreated indoors. The silence felt staged, like a set struck too quickly after a bad performance. He sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. His phone buzzed again. Marcus, his lawyer said the moment he answered. No greeting. No warmth. Where are you right now? In my car, Marcus replied. Outside the station. Was. Controlled. Professional. Did they release you? Yes. Another pause, shorter this time. Did they explain why you were detained? Marcus looked through the windshield at the dark road ahead. They explained nothing. They recorded everything. The lawyer exhaled. That's what I thought. Marcus drove. The car felt heavier now, as if it carried the entire night inside it. Every stoplight lingered too long. Marcus, the lawyer continued, this is already moving. Moving where? News desks, civil rights desk, internal affairs. Marcus tightened his grip on the wheel. I didn't call the press. You didn't have to, the lawyer said. Someone else did. Body cam footage exists. Dispatch logs exist. And your name carries weight. Marcus laughed once. A short, humorless sound. That's the problem, he said. It shouldn't. Silence stretched between them. Go home, the lawyer said. Do not post. Do not comment. We'll talk in the morning. The call ended. Marcus turned onto his street. The gates slid open automatically, recognizing his plates. The house lights came on as he pulled in. Soft, warm, indifferent. Inside, the quiet was louder. He poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen island, still wearing his coat. His reflection in the window looked intact. That almost made it worse. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Mr. Reed, a man said. Polite. Careful. This is Deputy Chief Harmon from the police department. Marcus said nothing. I wanted to personally apologize for tonight's inconvenience, Harmon continued. This is not how we conduct ourselves. Marcus closed his eyes. Inconvenience, he repeated. Yes, Harmon said quickly. There appears to have been a breakdown in communication. No, Marcus said. There was a breakdown in judgment. Marcus could hear papers shifting. We'd like to resolve this quietly, Harmon said. No need for misunderstandings to escalate. Quiet for who? Marcus asked. For everyone, Harmon replied. Marcus pictured the officer's face at the stop. The certainty. To come. Your officer didn't act quietly, Marcus said. He acted confidently. That officer followed protocol, Harmon said, then corrected himself. Within reason. Marcus leaned against the counter. Then you won't mind me following reason too, he said. Another pause. Longer now. We value community trust, Harmon said. Public attention complicates that. So does abuse, Marcus replied. The call ended soon after. No agreement reached. No threats made. Just distance reasserted. Marcus slept poorly. Every time he closed his eyes, red and blue light cut through the dark. By morning his name was everywhere. He learned that from the television glowing silently in his living room. His face, older photo, carefully chosen, filled the screen beneath a headline he didn't need to read to understand. Billionaire investor detained during traffic stop. He muted it. His phone rang again. Then again. Board members, partners, old friends who hadn't called in years. Most asked the same question. Are you okay? Marcus answered honestly. No. By noon, his lawyer sat across from him, tablet in hand. They're scrambling, she said. Internal emails. Damage control memos. The officer's report contradicts dispatch logs. Marcus nodded. They're not scrambling because it happened, he said. They're scrambling because it happened to me. His lawyer didn't disagree. We have options, she said. Civil suit. Public statement. Federal complaint. Marcus looked past her, out at the garden. What happens to the officer? He asked. She hesitated. If this stays public. Suspension at minimum. Possibly termination if prior complaints surface. And if it doesn't? She didn't answer immediately. Then nothing, she said finally. Marcus exhaled slowly. That afternoon, the officer gave his statement. Marcus saw it later leaked online. Voice. Neutral language. Subject appeared nervous. Vehicle inconsistent with driver profile. Stop conducted for community safety. Marcus replayed it twice. By evening, the police chief held a press conference. We are reviewing the matter, the chief said. We take all allegations seriously. Marcus turned the volume down again. That night, Marcus stood in his office, surrounded by awards and framed magazine covers. Proof of legitimacy, neatly displayed. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an old ID from his 20s. A younger face. Same skin. Same eyes. Back then, his name carried no weight at all. His phone buzzed one last time. Text message. Unknown sender. He did this to me too. I didn't have cameras. Marcus stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Me. And my son. He set the phone down carefully, as if it were something fragile. The truth settled into him. Not sharp, not sudden. Heavy. Certain. This wasn't about him being mistaken for something he wasn't. It was about how easily they had decided what he was. Marcus picked up the phone again and began to type. He didn't stop. The conference room was too bright. Marcus noticed that first. The way the overhead lights flattened faces, stripped warmth from skin tones, made everyone look slightly defensive even before they spoke. 6 people sat around the table. 2 civil rights attorneys. 1 policy analyst. Former public defender. A community organizer named Lena. And Marcus. A screen at the far end displayed a paused bodycam frame. His own hands on the hood of the car, fingers spread. This isn't an anomaly, the analyst said, breaking the silence. It's a pattern. Marcus nodded once. He already knew that. What he didn't know was how wide the pattern stretched. Lena leaned forward. We put out a call last night. Quietly. No press. Just community channels. She tapped her tablet. The screen changed. Locations. Traffic stops. Searches. Detentions. 83 responses in 12 hours, she said. Same officer appears in 17 of them. Marcus felt something tighten behind his eyes. 17, he repeated. One of the attorneys, James, spoke calmly. Most never filed complaints. Some tried. All were dismissed. Dismissed how? Marcus asked. James slid a folder across the table. Language, he said. Words like nervous, non-compliant, evasive. Coded but effective. Marcus opened the folder. Read. Subject appeared agitated. Officer feared for safety. No evidence of misconduct. He closed it. They learned how to write, Marcus said. Yes, James replied. And they learned who would be believed. A woman on the screen appeared now. Late 30s. Tired eyes. That's Denise Carter, Lena said. Pulled over 3 years ago. Same neighborhood. Same time of night. The video played. Marcus watched Denise explain calmly why she was there. Watched the officer interrupt her. Watched the situation escalate without a single raised voice. Do you know how humiliating it is, Denise said on the video, voice steady but thin, to be made a suspect in front of your kids? Marcus looked away. Another video. A man named Paul. Then a college student. Then a delivery driver. Different faces. Same rhythm. Why didn't this come out before? Marcus asked. James answered without hesitation. Because no one with leverage stayed. Lena added. Because the system absorbs people quietly. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So I'm the exception, he said. Yes, the analyst replied. And that matters. Marcus didn't like the word. The door opened briefly. An assistant whispered something to James. James nodded. They want a statement, James said. Media's circling. Marcus exhaled. I don't want to be the story. Lena met his eyes. You already are. The question is whether others get erased behind you. That landed harder than anything else had. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with 2 men who had reached out directly. They sat across from him in a smaller room. No cameras. No lawyers. The first man, Terence, kept his hands folded tightly. They stopped me last year, Terence said. Same officer. Asked me whose car it was. Marcus nodded. I told him it was mine, Terence continued. He laughed. Asked who really paid for it. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest. The second man, older, spoke next. They searched my trunk. Found nothing. Let me go. Did you file a complaint? Marcus asked. The man shook his head. I couldn't risk it. I work for the city. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. When the men left, Marcus stayed seated. This is why I'm angry, he said to no one in particular. Not because it happened to me. Because it didn't matter when it happened to them. James re-entered the room. You're allowed to be angry, he said. I'm not interested in permission, Marcus replied. That evening, Marcus sat alone in his office again. But this time the awards on the wall felt accusatory. His phone buzzed. A message from the deputy chief. We are placing the officer on administrative leave pending review. Marcus stared at the words. Administrative leave. Vague. Temporary. Vague. He typed back slowly. Is that accountability or optics? The response came minutes later. It's procedure. Marcus didn't reply. The next day he stood at a podium. Cameras clicked. Microphones crowded close. He hadn't planned a speech. He didn't need one. This isn't about a single stop, Marcus said. It's about a system that teaches confidence without conscience. A reporter shouted a question. Are you suing the department? Marcus paused. I'm listening, he said. And I'm not the only one. Behind the cameras, Lena watched, arms crossed. The officers' union released a statement an hour later. We stand by our member. He acted within his training. Marcus read it once. Then again. Within his training. That night Marcus couldn't sleep. Not because of fear but because of faces. Denise. Terence. The unnamed delivery driver. He understood something then that he hadn't fully grasped before. The stop hadn't ended when he was released. It had just widened. And this time, walking away would cost more than staying. The officer's name appeared on the screen before his face did. White background. Department seal in the corner. Neutral framing. Designed to feel official rather than personal. Marcus watched from his office. Arms folded, volume low. I followed my training, the officer said. Measured. At no point did I act with bias or malicious intent. The interviewer nodded. Sympathetic. Invisible agreement. Marcus leaned back in his chair. That tone, Lena said from the doorway. That's the one they teach. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The officer continued. In my line of work, you make split-second decisions. You rely on indicators. Behavior. Context. What he means, Marcus said, is instinct. Yes, Lena replied. And instinct doesn't get audited. On screen, the interviewer asked about Marcus directly. I didn't know who he was, the officer said. I treated him like anyone else. Marcus scoffed quietly. The officer's mouth tightened just slightly before he added, if anything, I was being cautious for everyone's safety. Lena crossed her arms. Notice what he didn't say. Marcus nodded. He didn't say he was wrong. The clip cut to body cam footage. Short segments. Edited. Annotated. The officer's voice played over it, narrating his own actions. I observed nervous behavior. Marcus watched himself in the footage. Still, compliant, careful. Vehicle inconsistent with subject profile. Marcus paused the video. Subject profile, he repeated. That phrase does work, Lena said. It makes prejudice sound procedural. Marcus resumed the video. The officer spoke again. When you see enough patterns, you learn to trust them. Marcus turned the screen off. That's the confession, he said. Across town, the officer sat in his own living room. Interview finished, tie loosened. His wife handed him a glass of water. You did fine, she said. He nodded, but his jaw remained tight. They're making me the villain, he muttered. You're not, she said quickly. You were doing your job. He stared at the muted television, now replaying his own face. They don't understand what it's like out there, he said. Every stop could turn. His phone buzzed. Text from a colleague. Union's got your back. Don't sweat it. He exhaled slowly. At headquarters, the union representative paced a narrow office. This is containment, she said into the phone. We frame it as procedure versus perception. Yes. He sticks to training language. No ad-libbing. Another pause. We don't concede intent. She hung up and scribbled notes. Emphasize danger. Emphasize unpredictability. Back in Marcus's office, James arrived with a folder thick enough to bow under its own weight. They released his internal statement, James said. Unofficially. Marcus took it. The language was familiar now. Officer detected heightened alertness. Subject questioned authority. Stop extended for safety evaluation. Marcus closed the folder. He's building a shield out of words, Marcus said. Yes, James replied. And the department is standing behind it. Lena looked at Marcus. This is the moment they usually win. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Usually the public gets tired, she said. Confused. Distracted. Marcus turned toward the window. Outside traffic moved normally. Life continued. They're betting on exhaustion, Marcus said. Yes. Marcus turned back. Then we don't rush. Later that day, Marcus agreed to meet the officer. One condition. No cameras, no lawyers in the room. The department resisted. Then relented. The room was small. Neutral. 2 chairs. A table between them. The officer entered first. He looked different without the uniform. Smaller. Less certain. Marcus entered moments later. They sat. Silence stretched. The officer cleared his throat. I want to say this isn't personal. Marcus studied him. The lines around his eyes. The posture trained to project authority even when seated. That's the problem, Marcus said. It never is. The officer frowned. You don't know what we deal with. I know exactly what you deal with, Marcus replied. You deal with power that rarely gets questioned. The officer shifted. I stopped you because things didn't add up. To you, Marcus said. Yes. the officer snapped, then steadied himself. To my experience. Marcus leaned forward. Your experience didn't include the possibility that I belonged, he said. Only that I didn't. The officer opened his mouth, closed it. I didn't know you were, he began. Successful, Marcus finished. Wealthy. Protected. The officer looked down. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, Marcus said calmly. You just don't like how it sounds out loud. The officer's voice hardened. So what do you want from me? Marcus didn't answer immediately. I want you to understand something, he said finally. The worst part wasn't the stop. It was how normal it felt to you. The officer stood abruptly. I'm not a racist. Marcus remained seated. I didn't say you were, he replied. I said you were trained not to notice when you are. The officer left without another word. That night, the department released another statement. We are confident our internal review will demonstrate appropriate conduct. Marcus read it once. Then he received an email. Anonymous. A scanned document attached. A list of complaints. Years old. Buried. Same officer. Same language. Marcus forwarded it to James and Lena without comment. The officer's interview replayed again on television. This time viewers noticed something different. Not anger. Certainty. And certainty, once exposed, was harder to defend than rage. Marcus turned off the screen. The story had shifted. Not because the officer spoke, but because he finally revealed how deeply he believed himself. The documents hit the newsroom at 9:12 a.m. By 9:14, 3 editors were arguing over jurisdiction. By 9:30, the phones at the police department stopped ringing because no one could keep up anymore. Marcus found out the way he had learned most things lately, through silence breaking. James called first. They verified the complaints. Marcus closed his laptop. How many? A breath on the line. More than we thought. Enough to establish pattern, not coincidence. Lena texted a single word a minute later. Live. Marcus turned on the television. The anchor spoke carefully, the way people do when facts are finally heavier than opinion. Newly obtained records show a series of complaints filed against the same officer involved in last month's high-profile traffic stop. Complaints that were previously deemed unsubstantiated, despite striking similarities in language, location, and conduct. The screen filled with redacted pages. Dates circled. Phrases highlighted. Vehicle inconsistent with driver profile. Subject appeared nervous. Officer feared for safety. Marcus felt a dull pressure settle behind his eyes. Not surprise. Confirmation. At headquarters, the deputy chief stood in a glass-walled conference room surrounded by advisors. No one sat. Sitting felt like surrender. We issue a statement, one aide said. Firm but neutral. We wait, another argued. Let the review process. The review process is the problem, the deputy chief snapped. It's why we're here. Across town, the officer watched the same broadcast from his couch. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again. He didn't answer. On the screen, a former internal affairs investigator spoke. When complaints share identical language over multiple years, the investigator said, that suggests template behavior, not isolated judgment. The officer muted the TV. His wife stood in the doorway. They're turning on you, she said quietly. They always do, he replied. When it gets loud enough. At Marcus's office, Lena paced. This is bigger than him now, she said. They can't contain it. James nodded. Federal oversight is on the table. Marcus leaned against the desk. People keep asking what I want, he said. As if that's the point. James looked at him. What do you want? Marcus answered without hesitation. I want them to stop calling this a mistake. By afternoon, the department announced an external review. The language was careful. Independent oversight. Commitment to transparency. Community trust. Marcus read the statement once, then forwarded it to Lena. She replied seconds later. They're conceding ground without admitting fault. That evening, Marcus stood before a civilian review board. The room was packed. Community members lined the walls. Some held folders. Others held nothing but folded arms and memory. Marcus took the seat at the center table. A board member adjusted her microphone. "Mr. Reed, thank you for being here." Marcus nodded. "Please describe the emotional impact of the incident," she said. Marcus considered the question. "I can describe the process," he said. "The emotional part doesn't belong to just me." A murmur rippled through the room. "When I was stopped," Marcus continued, "I knew what to do, how to speak, how to survive the interaction." He paused. "That knowledge is not a privilege. It's a burden." One board member leaned forward. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm stating," Marcus said gently, "that many people don't leave with a story to tell. They leave with silence." A woman in the audience wiped her eyes. Another board member spoke. "Do you believe the officer acted with racial bias?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. "I believe the system trained him to rely on assumptions," he said, "and rewarded him for never questioning them." The room went quiet. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, something shifted. Later that night, the officer was officially terminated. The announcement came without ceremony. Violation of department standards. Loss of public confidence. Marcus read it on his phone while standing in his kitchen. No relief came. Instead, his chest felt hollow. James called soon after. "They're referring the case to the state attorney general." "Criminal?" Marcus asked. "Possible," James said. "At minimum, civil liability." Marcus stared at the dark window. "And the others?" he asked. "The complaints before mine?" James hesitated. "They're reopening them." Marcus closed his eyes. The next morning, Marcus walked past protesters outside the department. Some held signs with his name. Others held names he didn't recognize. That mattered more. Inside the building, the deputy chief addressed the press. "We acknowledge failures," he said. "We are committed to reform." A reporter shouted, "Why did it take a billionaire to expose this?" The deputy chief didn't answer. Marcus watched the clip later. That question stayed. That afternoon, Marcus received a handwritten letter. "No return address. I was afraid to speak," it read. "Now I'm not." Marcus folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. That night, alone again, Marcus returned to the same stretch of road where it had started. No lights this time. No sirens. Just asphalt and quiet. He pulled over anyway. Saturday. Listen. The power of the moment wasn't in what had changed, but in what refused to disappear. The memory. The knowledge. The understanding that exposure didn't erase damage. It only made it visible. Marcus started the car and drove on. The story wasn't finished, but it was no longer hidden. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and restraint. Marcus sat in the second row, hands folded, posture still. He had learned that stillness drew attention without asking for it. Across the aisle, the officer sat with his attorney. No uniform, no badge. Just a suit that didn't quite fit the shoulders anymore. The judge entered. Everyone rose. Everyone sat. The prosecutor spoke first, voice measured, deliberate. She didn't dramatize. She didn't need to. "This case is not about one decision," she said. "It is about repeated decisions made under the protection of authority." Marcus listened. He had heard these words before, in drafts, in meetings. They sounded different here. Final. The defense followed. "My client acted within his understanding of procedure," the attorney said. "There is no evidence of malicious intent." Marcus watched the officer's face. Still composed. Still convinced that intent mattered more than outcome. The judge leaned forward. "Intent explains," she said. "It does not excuse." A murmur moved through the gallery. The officer was called to testify. He stood. That again. "Did you believe Mr. Reed posed a threat?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," the officer said. Based on my experience. What specifically indicated threat? The officer paused. Behavior. What behavior? Nervousness. Questioning. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Do you acknowledge, the prosecutor asked, that those same descriptors appear in prior complaints against you? The officer hesitated. I don't recall. The prosecutor raised a document. This is your language. The officer looked at it. Then away. Yes, he said. That appears to be my report. Repeated, the prosecutor said. Over years. The officer said nothing. When Marcus was called, the room shifted. He took the stand calmly. Mr. Reed, the prosecutor asked, did you feel threatened that night? Marcus considered. I felt evaluated, he said. Reduced. The defense attorney rose. Objection. Sustained, the judge said. Rephrase. Marcus continued anyway, voice steady. I felt like my safety depended on how well I performed someone else's comfort. Silence followed. After hours of testimony, the judge ruled. Civil liability established. Departmental failures cited. Charges forwarded for further review. No applause. No cheers. Marcus felt no triumph. Outside, reporters crowded close. Do you feel justice was served? One asked. Marcus paused. I feel accountability began, he said. Justice takes longer. Across the steps, the officer exited through a side door. No cameras there. Just a man walking away from a building that no longer needed him. Weeks passed. The department entered a federal consent decree. New training protocols announced. Oversight committees formed. Press releases multiplied. Marcus read them all. They sounded careful. Controlled. Clean. Too clean. One afternoon Marcus met with Denise again. And Terence. And others whose names had never trended. They sat in a circle, no table between them. They reopened my case, Denise said. I got a letter. So did I, Terence added. Apology included. Marcus nodded. Does it help? Denise considered. It helps knowing it wasn't just me. That mattered. Later that week, Marcus stood alone outside the same police station. The flag still flew. The building still stood. Change, he understood, didn't look dramatic. It looked incremental. Bureaucratic. Fragile. His phone buzzed. Message from James. AG declining criminal charges. Civil remedies upheld. Marcus read it twice. He felt disappointment but not surprise. That night Marcus met the officer one last time. It wasn't planned. It wasn't mediated. They crossed paths outside a parking garage. The officer froze first. Marcus stopped too. Neither spoke. Finally the officer said, You won. Marcus shook his head. No. The officer frowned. You cost me my job. Marcus stepped closer. Not threatening. Just present. You cost yourself that, he said. I just refused to disappear. The officer's face tightened. I was doing what I was taught. Marcus nodded. That's why this matters. They stood there, two men shaped by the same system in different ways. Then Marcus turned and walked away. Months later, Marcus funded a legal aid initiative. Not branded. Not named after him. Just resourced. He attended fewer events. Slept less. Started therapy he hadn't known he needed. The trauma lingered. In traffic stops that weren't his. In flashing lights seen from afar. Resilience, he learned, wasn't a victory lap. It was maintenance. One evening Marcus drove that road again. Same speed. Same hands on the wheel. Patrol car passed him going the other direction. No lights. No stop. Marcus kept driving. Not because everything was fixed. But because this time, the cost of stopping had finally been recorded. And that, imperfect as it was, changed what came next. The road looked ordinary in daylight. Marcus noticed that first, the absence of drama. No glare of headlights. No rain-slick pavement. Just a two-lane stretch cutting through trimmed hedges and quiet houses. He drove it slowly. Not out of fear. out of intention. Months had passed since the ruling. Long enough for headlines to fade. Long enough for the department's new policies to be announced, revised, re-announced. Long enough for people to tell Marcus with sincere smiles that things were better now. Better was a word without weight. He parked near the curb and cut the engine. The silence pressed in. Marcus sat there, hands resting loosely on the wheel, and felt the memory arrive. Not as images but as posture. The way his shoulders had tightened. The way his voice had flattened. The way he had learned to make himself smaller without disappearing. He stepped out of the car. A jogger passed, nodding politely. A woman watered her lawn. Somewhere a garage door opened and closed. Normalcy had returned. That was the danger of it. Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Lena. Federal Monitor approved community advisory seats. Real ones. Marcus typed back. Keep pushing. He put the phone away and walked a few steps along the sidewalk. Each footfall felt deliberate, like a rehearsal of something he hadn't realized he'd lost. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with the legal aid team he had funded. Borrowed office. Folding chairs. Whiteboard still smudged with someone else's work. No branding. No plaque. A young attorney spoke first. We've taken on 22 cases so far. Marcus nodded. How many would have gone nowhere? Most, she said honestly. A man in the corner raised his hand. We're seeing faster responses from departments. Not apologies. Responses. That matters, Marcus said. Another attorney added. People feel safer filing complaints. Marcus thought of the word safer. Thought of how low the bar was. That's a start, he said. When the meeting ended, Marcus lingered. The room emptied slowly, conversations spilling into the hallway. Ordinary voices, grounded in purpose. Lena stayed behind. You're quieter lately, she said. Marcus smiled faintly. I'm tired. She studied him. That doesn't look like retreat. It isn't, he said. It's recalibration. She nodded. Just don't vanish. Marcus met her gaze. I won't. I just won't be everywhere. That night, Marcus sat in his living room with the lights off. The city beyond the windows pulsed softly. Distant sirens, traffic, life moving without ceremony. His phone lay face up on the table. No alerts. No emergencies. He opened a folder he hadn't touched in weeks. Inside were scanned letters. Messages. Handwritten notes. I told my son what happened to you. He asked why it mattered. I told him because someone stayed. Marcus closed the folder. He thought of the officer. Not with anger, not with sympathy, but with clarity. Systems didn't collapse because one man fell. They changed when patterns were named, documented, refused. The next morning, Marcus was invited to speak at a closed-door session with city officials. No press. No cameras. A council member cleared her throat. We appreciate your time. Marcus nodded. Use it well. They discussed budgets, training, oversight. Marcus listened more than he spoke. When it was over, the council member asked, Is there anything else you'd like to add? Marcus paused. Don't wait for the next exception, he said. Listen to the rule. Silence followed. Weeks later, Marcus received a call from Terence. They dropped it, Terence said. The ticket. The record. Marcus smiled. Good. Listen, Terence continued, voice thickening slightly. Thank you for not making this about winning. Marcus looked out the window. It was never about that, he said. On a quiet Sunday evening, Marcus drove again. Same road. Same speed. This time, a patrol car merged behind him. Marcus noticed the familiar tightening, but it loosened more quickly now. The patrol car passed. Kept going. Marcus didn't exhale in relief. He exhaled in acknowledgement that the moment still lived in him. That healing wasn't erasure. That resilience wasn't forgetting. He drove on. Later, as he pulled into his driveway, Marcus checked his phone one last time. A notification from a local paper. Community Oversight Board holds first independent hearing. No mention of his name. He smiled. Inside, Marcus placed his keys on the counter and stood still. The cost had been real. The damage undeniable. But so was the record now. Not just of what happened but of what followed. Marcus turned off the lights. The road behind him faded into darkness. Not erased. Documented. And that, finally, was enough to let him rest. Time did what it always did. It dulled urgency without erasing memory. Marcus noticed it in small ways first. The way his phone no longer buzzed every hour. The way his name appeared less often in articles, then disappeared entirely unless attached to quarterly earnings or market forecasts. Normal visibility restored. He wasn't sure when that had become a privilege. On a gray morning nearly a year after the stop, Marcus sat in the back of a modest lecture hall at a state university. No cameras, no press. Just students shifting in their seats, backpacks on the floor, notebooks half open. A professor at the front spoke quietly. "Today we're discussing institutional power," she said. "Not in theory. In practice." She gestured toward Marcus. "Mr. Reed is here as a case study. Not a symbol." Marcus appreciated that distinction. When it was his turn to speak, he stood without moving to the podium. "I won't tell you what to think," he said. "I'll tell you what happened." He described the stop. The language. The escalation without shouting. The certainty that never raised its voice. A student raised her hand. "Did you know it would turn into all of that?" Marcus shook his head. "I knew it would end one of two ways. Quietly or publicly." "Why didn't you choose quiet?" another student asked. Marcus paused. "Because quiet has a body count," he said. No one spoke after that. Later, walking across campus, Marcus passed a campus police cruiser. The officer inside nodded politely. Marcus nodded back. The interaction was uneventful. That too was the point. Across the city, the department struggled with its new oversight board. Meetings ran long. Tensions flared. Old habits resisted exposure. Progress was slow. But it was documented. At a community center on the east side, a meeting unfolded in folding chairs and coffee-stained tables. No headlines here. A mother spoke about her son. A retired man spoke about a stop from 10 years ago. A teenager listened without interrupting. Marcus sat in the back again. He had learned that staying visible didn't always mean standing in front. During a break, a woman approached him. Mid-40s. Tired eyes. Steady voice. "They stopped me last month," she said. "New officers. New training." Marcus waited. "They didn't escalate," she continued. "They let me go. No search." She hesitated. "I don't know if that's because of what you did." Marcus shook his head. "It's because people kept watching." That night, Marcus reviewed a draft of a report from the Legal Aid Initiative. Case outcomes. Patterns. Not miracles. Movement. He signed off on the funding extension without comment. His therapist asked him once weeks later, "Do you still replay it?" Marcus answered honestly, "Yes, but it doesn't direct me anymore." "What does?" she asked. "Responsibility," he said. "Without obsession." In traffic one evening, Marcus found himself boxed in at a red light. Police cruiser behind him. SUV to his left. Nowhere to shift. His pulse quickened. He noticed it. Named it. Let it pass. The light turned green. No siren. No command. He drove on. At home, Marcus stood before a blank wall he had never filled with accolades. He had removed the awards months earlier. Not out of shame. Out of recalibration. He had kept one thing. A printed copy of the first complaint ever filed against the officer. Not as a trophy. As a reminder of delay. Cost. Marcus received an email late one night. No subject line. It read, "I became an officer because I saw what happened to you. I'm still learning what to do with that." Marcus stared at the screen. Then typed back, "Learn slowly. Learn publicly." Learn with consequences. He sent it. The city released its annual report the following quarter. Buried on page 32 was a statistic few noticed. Traffic stop disparities down 12%. Not zero, but measured. Marcus read it twice. He didn't celebrate. He archived it. On the anniversary of the stop, Marcus did nothing special. No post. No statement. No reflection piece. He went to work. To calls. Reviewed numbers. Signed documents. That evening he drove home on a different route. Not avoidance. As he parked, he noticed something he hadn't before. The absence of tension when he turned the engine off. It didn't mean the memory was gone. It meant it no longer dictated the present. Inside, Marcus poured a glass of water and stood by the window. Lights moved in the distance. Sirens echoed faintly, then faded. He understood something now that had taken time to settle. Justice wasn't a moment. It was maintenance, attention, refusal. The story that began with lights in the dark had not ended cleanly or neatly. Had ended with records, with process, with witnesses who no longer stood alone. Marcus finished his water and set the glass down. Tomorrow would not be safer because he was wealthy. It would be safer only if people kept naming what they saw. He turned off the light. Not because the work was done, but because it no longer required his name to continue. The first time Marcus noticed the silence, it unsettled him. Not the absence of noise. Cities never truly slept, but the absence of expectation. No alerts. No interviews. No messages framed as urgency disguised as concern. Just time. He sat at his desk early one morning, sunlight cutting across the wood grain, and realized no one was waiting for his reaction to anything. The machine had moved on. Markets shifted. News cycles rotated. New crises took their place. This, he understood, was how systems survived. They waited for attention to leave. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Below, people crossed the street with coffee cups and backpacks, heads down, lives intact. None of them knew his name. None of them needed to. That felt right. Later that day, Marcus met with the federal monitor assigned to the department. No cameras. No posturing. Just binders and timelines. "We're seeing compliance," the monitor said. "Not enthusiasm. But compliance." Marcus nodded. "That's honest." The monitor smiled faintly. "It's rare to hear that." They discussed benchmarks, training audits, disciplinary thresholds that could no longer be quietly ignored. As the meeting ended, the monitor asked, "Do you plan to stay involved?" Marcus considered the question. "I plan to stay reachable," he said. "Not central." The monitor understood. That evening, Marcus attended a small dinner hosted by a foundation he supported. No speeches, no plaques, just conversation. A young woman across the table spoke hesitantly. "My brother was stopped last year," she said. "Before everything changed." Marcus listened. "He still flinches when he sees lights," she continued. "Even now." Marcus nodded. "So do I." She looked surprised. "I didn't think," she began. "I know," Marcus said gently. Trauma, he had learned, did not check resumes. On the drive home, Marcus passed a familiar intersection. He slowed instinctively, then caught himself. He didn't need to rehearse anymore. The reflex faded, replaced by awareness rather than fear. At home, Marcus opened a drawer and removed the final document he had kept private. The officer's termination notice. He read it once more. Not for validation. For closure. He placed it in a folder labeled Archive and slid it back into the drawer. Some things did not need to stay close to the surface. Weeks later, Marcus received an invitation to sit on an advisory panel. Symbolic. Influential. Visible. He declined. Instead, he recommended Lena. "She belongs there," he wrote. "She listens longer than she speaks." The appointment was confirmed within days. Lena called him that night. "You sure?" she asked. "Yes. You could have taken it." Marcus smiled to himself. That's why I didn't. The seasons shifted. Summer heat pressed down, then eased. On a cool evening in early autumn, Marcus attended a community forum. Not as a guest, not as a speaker. Just as a resident. A young officer spoke nervously at the front of the room. "We're learning," the officer said. "And we're being watched." Marcus caught the word. Not hunted. Not targeted. Observed. Countable. After the meeting, the officer approached Marcus quietly. "I read about you," the officer said. "In training." Marcus studied him. "What did they say?" "That power isn't neutral," the officer replied. "And silence is a decision." Marcus nodded. "Then remember that when it's inconvenient." The officer did. On the final anniversary of the stop, Marcus drove the road one last time on purpose. Same stretch, same speed. He pulled over briefly. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. He stepped out, stood under the open sky, and listened. No sirens. No commands. Just wind moving through trees and the distant sound of traffic. The moment passed without spectacle. Marcus returned to the car and continued on. That night, he wrote a single sentence in a private journal he rarely used. What happened to me mattered because what happened to others mattered first. He closed the book. The next morning, a report crossed his desk. Traffic stop disparities down again. Marginally. Measurably. Marcus forwarded it without comment. Work continued. Life continued. And somewhere, a person being pulled over tonight would face an interaction slightly altered. Not fixed, not healed, but changed by records, pressure, memory. Marcus knew he would never know their name. That was the point. The story that began with lights in the dark did not end with applause or absolution. It ended with systems forced to remember. And with a man who refused to let silence pretend nothing had happened, then refused to make himself the center of what followed. Marcus turned off the light and went to bed. Not victorious. Not broken. Just awake enough to know that change did not announce itself. It accumulated. And that finally was enough.